Hello, friends, and welcome back to another video about Adobe InDesign. Today, we're going to be exploring the tables menu and the tables panel. I've given you two sets of instructions that you're going to use to help you create and manipulate tables in Adobe InDesign. We use tables for a lot of reasons and a lot of different purposes, but one of the things that I like it best for is helping me organize information for a visual effect for my readers, my users. So I want to make sure that you know how to not only insert a table into Adobe InDesign, but also to be able to manipulate and adjust that table. So for activity one, I have provided you the table to start with, along with some different instructions, but we're going to hit the highlights of how to use the tables. For activity, the second part of the activity, you're going to be inserting your own table and then manipulating it according to the directions I've given you. We're going to go through the highlights of how to use this, and then I'm going to leave you to follow the instructions that you will have to read. So let's first start by talking about the table menu. In here, you have the ability to not only create a table, but we have some other options that are grayed out right now because I'm not actively in a table. One of the things I do like to share is that manipulating the table can be a little frustrating if you're used to something like tables in Microsoft Word or even Microsoft Excel. It behaves very differently in the Adobe software. So, first, let's just talk about how to manipulate something. Once you're in here, you can right click and you have some of the choices, but unfortunately, the best choice is always going to go to the table menu. So, the first thing I'm asking you to do is to insert a new row. So you can insert a new row, you can insert a new column, things like that. Just to make sure that you're understanding the terminology I'm using, rows go horizontally and columns go vertically up and down. So directions is to insert a new row. So I'm going to say insert row, and it's just going to populate and it's going to let me know if I want to do above or below, and I can choose how many. We're going to do one above for now. In some of the other programs that you've probably manipulated, you can do things like merge cells, split cells, and all of that is available to you here as well. So now that I've got some cells highlighted, when I right click this time, I do get some more specific table commands, and one of them is merge cell. I like to do this especially if I'm doing like a title or something like that. And so I'm going to change the top of this to student data, and I'm going to center all of this just because I typically like that look. It is not in your directions to center, but I'm going to go ahead and center. And I actually like to center and center. So I like to center paragraph, and then I like to actually center inside the cell. Once I've selected this, it does on my properties, my options bar up here, give me the ability to change things. So I'm going to change my font to Arial. I'm going to change it to bold, Arial bold. And then I'm going to change my font size to 14 per the instructions. Typically, headers, of course, are usually a little bit bigger. I'm going to change all of my column headers to bold. So that's your name, favorite color, favorite season, birth month, all of that. So I'm going to change that to bold again, just to help distinguish that so that we know that those are headers. If you'll notice the column with Ryan versus Emily versus Glenn versus, they're all different. So I'm going to actually highlight my table here, and I'm going to right click. And one of the choices I have is distribute columns evenly. This to me is a lot more efficient if I want to ensure that everything is nice and even. And then it's going to automatically put everything even. So I don't have to worry about whether arranging these individually. You can also get to that through the type menu. You can do this for rows or you can do this with columns. You can, however, individually move up if you wanted to individually move up the pieces. That's just a personal preference, in my opinion, the way you decide to do that. I just like to work smarter, not harder. When you have your table selected, just to kind of show you, you also have some table options that you can come in here and manipulate. So you can go into table setup. And when you get into table setup, you can determine if you needed to add a lot more rows or a lot more columns. You can also add some spacing. You can put a border on your tables, things like that. So that's a good panel to know. The other thing that I'd like you to do is adjust some of your strokes or the lines between. So if you look at number 4, we're going to go into table options, fill and stroke. But again, we have to have everything selected that we want to manipulate first, just like if we were doing a text box or anything like that. So we're going to go to cell options, stroke, and fill. And now I can make some adjustments. I've asked you to change it to a 2-point weight with the style called Thin Thin, which and then the color, you can just choose kind of any shade of blue that you want to, and then we're gonna say okay. And you'll see that it changed that very quickly for us and very effectively. We're gonna select just the top row and we're gonna fill this to blue. Again, we're gonna do that under Table, Cell Options, Strokes, and Fill. And instead of filling the weight of this, we're gonna come down to Cell Fill, and I'm gonna change that to just any old shade of blue, it doesn't matter. And I'm gonna change my font to white so that I can see my text a little bit more effectively. We've got a couple of cells here that are empty, so we're actually gonna fill these with some X's just so that when somebody goes to look at this, they can see it's very quickly filled. So I'm under the cell options again, and this time I'm under diagonal lines, and I'm gonna put an X in every cell that does not have data. That's a good one. It's a good quick visual thing. I like to sometimes mark cells where I need to put data in later and maybe I just haven't gotten to it. You also have different types of diagonals that you can play with, but I just want you to understand how to do that. While you're in here, you may just want to kind of look and see your other choices and figure out how you can manipulate. Again, you can center everything, or you can bottom align it, top align it, you can justify it, all these kind of choices. You can highlight up here and fill up your cell up at the top. So, exploring how to use this and actually trying to change things and manipulate things, I think, is much more effective to master using your tables. Now, let's talk about inserting. We're gonna go to table again, and we're gonna say insert table, and I'm gonna do a 5-row by 3-column, and I'm gonna make sure I have 1 header row, and I'm gonna say okay. And it's gonna place that in automatically for me. Now, I was already had my cursor here, which is why it just placed this here. If you wanna move that down, you kinda have to get your kinda cursor kind of nestled in here, if you will, in order to give yourself some space. And then you can enter down to get it below. I'm in a table box, which is why it just automatically placed that here. If I did not have anything, which I'm gonna take my table box here and shrink it down so it's just for that one table, and I do this again and say, okay, it gives me this little cursor. You see how my cursor changed and now it looks like it has a table. So now I can click where I want that table box to go. And I really wanted you to see that because you can see the size of it is much bigger than the one that came in before. If there were nothing here, it would try to fill up the entire page. And it does that automatically, which has always been kind of funky to me. Once you've got this in, let's fill it in with some data. You can see what we're going to do is we're going to add some headers and we're going to put in name, age, and grade. And then you're going to ask some classmates around you to help you fill this in. All right, so next we're going to change the size of our table. So before we can really get into this, we want to make sure that we have a window, type, and tables, and we want to have that table panel pulled up. When you have the table panel pulled up, you now can change the size and the width of your cells and your columns. So we're going to change this to the column width is going to be 0.5 and the row, I'm sorry, yeah, and the column width is going to be 2 inches and the row is going to be 0.5 inches. Um, it is good to note that it's based on the size here is based on whatever the size of your ruler is. So if it's set to pixels, for example, it's going to be 36 pixels. I've defaulted this worksheet to be in inches, but just kind of note if you're working normally, it's going to default to the points. I am not somebody who works in points. I typically prefer pixels or inches. So keep in mind that when you change the rulers in InDesign, unlike Illustrator or Photoshop, it changes, you have to change both the horizontal and the vertical ruler. You can't just change one and it changes both. So kind of keep that in mind. So I'm going to go back to inches because I prefer inches. And I'm going to ask you to set your table here to match the directions that I have on your worksheet. And again, you need your table panel open in order to do that. We're going to align everything here to the center of the cells so that when we put our data in, and I'm going to go ahead and change my paragraph to center as well. And then for every column, excuse me, I am going to ask you to recolor to something different. It's your choice which color you choose to do, but I am going to ask you when you set this to set it to a tint of 20% so that we can still see the data. So we're just going to do a soft one. Again, you can choose the colors that you want, but we're going to change each column to a new color. I'm not putting in any data for now because I don't have any classmates around me to ask, but please make sure that you put everything in order to manipulate this. A couple other things that I just want you to see that are available to you on the text the table panel is you can also change the orientation of your text, which can be very neat depending on what it is you're trying to do. If you're trying to do really skinny columns, for example, you may want your text to go side by side so that it will fit if you're doing like data, numbers, things like that. So knowing that you have some variety of choices of the way the orientation of the text is available for you as well. You can save your table style. So if you get a table style set the way you want, you can hit the plus, and then in here it will set up, your row strokes, your column strokes, all your fills, and everything like that. So if you use a style over and over and over, there's no reason to redo that each time. Just set it up as a style, and then you can apply that style quickly. Hope this has helped you understand how to manipulate and use tables better in Adobe InDesign. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.